and they'll interpret something a character does as something you might think as an author, okay, I intended that this, but they'll see something really subtle in there. And they'll say, oh, this was really interesting why this character did this. And you're like, wow, I didn't even see that. And then it hits you. Like somebody said to me about my first book, and I didn't think about it. They said, this is a love story. And I said, but it's not. And they said, no, it is. It's a woman falling in love with her life.
Welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Rinaldi. This is a space to explore the full spectrum of grief, from the kind that comes with death to the kind that shows up in life's many transitions. Through stories and conversations, we remind each other that we're not alone. Your journey matters, and here we're figuring it out together. Let's dive right in to today's episode. Hello and welcome to today's conversation. Today I am chatting with Leslie Rasmussen. She is a former TV comedy writer. She has written for many people. I'm not going to name drop here, but you can if you want. She then later changed gears and earned her master's in nutrition and ran her own business for a decade. And now she is a novelist. She is an award-winning novelist. And now she has her latest book is called When People Leave, which is one of the ones we'll be talking about today. It's the one that I read, and that has to do with grief. So welcome, Leslie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Kendra. I'm happy to be here.
I am glad that you are here and chatting with me about this. And I'm curious as to when you've gone on these book, when you launch a book, you go on all these different interviews and things. What has been something that people have asked you consistently in every single interview? Is there something that like it's a go-to question that people usually ask you? Just
They usually
curious.
ask me about my sitcom background. That's
Oh,
usually
really?
probably the first thing most people ask me about. Yeah. Because a lot of people are curious and want to know how it works and all that kind of things. And also like how I ended up going from that to books, to writing books.
Yes, which that's part of the conversation. How I want to lead the conversation is this aspect of all these different hats and changing and transition and constantly kind of reinventing ourselves. And as mothers, we sometimes take a break from even our careers to dedicate to motherhood. And then it's like, oh, who am I now? Like, who am I now? Really? Like, maybe I was this 10 years ago. Maybe I was this 20 years ago. Who am I now? So, has part of your journey been that of kind of rediscovering in each stage of your life? And take us into that journey, and then we'll see where we go next.
Exactly. That's exactly what you just said. I got out of college and I started writing sitcoms after being an assistant for different shows. And I loved it. I loved every bit of it. But then I started having kids, and the hours were just too difficult to do. So I stopped, like you said. And for a while, I raised my kids. And then when my second son went to school, I thought, well, now what do I do? So it was like, that's my first career. So I thought, well, what do I like? I couldn't get back into TV and I didn't want to do the hours. So I was really into nutrition and health. So I got a master's, like you said, and I ran my own business and saw clients. But during that time, I missed the writing. Writing has always been my passion. So I started writing essays for Huffington Post about my family, about my husband, about me, all kinds of stuff, some about nutrition. And I had all of those posted on Huffington Post. And little by little, I started to think, "Ugh, I really don't want to do this nutrition anymore. I want to go back to writing." And books sort of just came to me. I mean, it wasn't an easy process. I did a lot of classes and I had a coach, and it took a while. But I started to realize I was creating this character who was, and this is my first book called After Happily Ever After, but she was 45 years old in the middle of her life, and her only daughter was going off to college, and she had issues with her husband, and she was in the sandwich generation, so she had older parents, and it was about her sort of like trying to figure out, who am I in the second chapter of my life. So it was also based, it wasn't, I'm not the character, but it was based on my life and a lot of my friends' lives. Because a lot of people, when they become moms, they give up their career and it's not always easy to go back to.
Well, that's the other one that you had suggested that I would read would be the After Happily Ever After, because that's exactly where I'm at this particular moment in my life. Is one kid already just graduated from high school. My other one's about to be a senior, so I'll have two kids going to college. And I mean, I've been doing the podcast for the past 5 years, but again, it's something I can do from home. But it's this self kind of discovery of, okay, now what? And so I will definitely have to read that one next as well, because I know a lot of us can relate to that. Men don't often take these breaks and hiatuses in their life and as parents. I'm saying often, and I'm using the word often because a lot of times it is the male that ends up being the one that to stay at home if that's what the couple decides to do. So it is a very uh, common common feeling that we have as women at this particular stage. So that is what's the name of that character? What's her name?
Maggie, her name is Maggie
Maggie.
Dolan.
Maggie. So you then went from sitcom to this. Is that one also is the theme of that one also more of a serious theme, or does it also have comedy? Because When People Leave does not have any
Well, it
comedy. I mean,
has
there's some little
comedy and
comedic
lightness with
in
the
within it.
sisters.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah, they
yes, yeah.
all
There's
have
some
humor in them.
interactions. Right. They have
Maggie's
some kind of interactions. Yeah.
That story, After Happily Ever After, probably has the most humor in it. And she makes all these decisions that she shouldn't be making, and her life's blowing up. And that's from first person, so you kind of hear what she's going through. But yes, When People Leave has humor in it between the sisters, but it's a little bit
Mhm.
more serious.
Yeah. And humor is so important because humor does make a part even when we're grieving for things. Like there are aspects in which the sisters are in a situation like, okay, I'll just say something like the what was it? It was it the phone I forget if there was one moment in which the phone rang or something, and it's like, and what did she say? It was something like, oh my gosh, now I'm trying to think which part it was, and it was something like something about mom. Did mom call? But mom, the characters are so it's kind of this thing of like, and then they're like laughing, and what did she? It was like they're
They have
adding that
they have
humor.
a sister relationship where they give each other a lot of crap. And that's like I have 2 sisters also, and I wanted to write a book about sisters, but I didn't want my sisters to be in the book at all because I didn't want to deal with that. So all of the sisters, including the one that would be me, is so different from all of us. But the part that's the same is some of those conversations are from my sisters and I. Some of
Oh
those
my gosh.
the scene when they're having lunch and one of them says, "I don't like avocado." "No, I like avocado. I don't like beets." "You like beets." "Yes, you do." Those conversations I've had with my sisters. So there is stuff in there from my childhood and my relationship with them now. But I just like that's my background, so I love writing dialogue and I like snarky dialogue a lot of times.
Mm.
So yeah.
And now, how attached do you get to the book and the storyline that it actually is sad when you finish it?
It's always sad when I finish it just because the first book especially because I was really attached to Maggie, just because I had gone through that and I had really lived it. But every book, usually once I finish a book, I'm sort of taking a break and then I'm trying to think about the next book. So sometimes I get confused as to which characters I'm writing for or which characters I'm thinking about. But yeah, I always miss the characters. I miss just the way they interact.
And there's a beauty about this. There are several shows that and I know people can relate to this, that when they've ended, people grieve the ending of these TV shows. And the same when you're like done with reading a book, you not only grieve while you're reading and listening, but you really truly invest in these characters and you want to know, okay, now what are they doing? Like, I want to know what happens next. And I'm sure that that's why so many sequels are sometimes done when books are written, because people are do have this longing of wanting to know what comes next. So with this book, it has the topic of grief in it, and as I was reading it, I could relate to a lot. Can we say who dies in the book or not?
Yes,
Should
it's
we?
it's
Can
it's
we?
the mother, Carla.
Is it okay? Okay. So it's four main characters. Each chapter will be either about Carla, Morgan, Abby, or Charlie, and it's in the perspective of each of them, which I love too, because when one person dies, let's say in this case a parent, how each person grieves when someone dies is so unique, and how everybody expresses or deals with it based on their own personality or their own challenges is different. And you show that very well with each of the characters and their own struggles. And there's other grief within that too. There's one character that there's grief even in her stage of motherhood, what we were just saying now, of kind of like, well, what else do I have aside from this role as mom? I want something else. And that's
Yeah, you do
something that
grieve. You
happens.
grieve your life. You grieve what you had. You grieve when your kids grow up. You grieve their
Mhm.
childhood. There's so much grief in just life, even though, we just talk about loss a lot, but that is grief. And whatever stages you are in your life, you're looking back and going, oh, do I grieve my 20s? Do I grieve my 30s?
Yes.
So there's a lot of grief in all my books. I realized the other day, I was realizing, wow, they all have some sort of grief in every book.
Yes, and that's the thing. It's like it's only really more now that I'm hearing more of this conversation. I've always seen it that way, that really grief comes from life transitions, even joyful ones. One of my first podcast was me saying, even with becoming a mom, I grieved in that stage of my life, because then it was kind of like, well, where is the other part of my who am I now? Like, even where is Kendra? Um, so so I see that shift of people really realizing that grief is just part of our everyday, and a lot of these different transitions. Now, with the characters going through this, and as someone's either reading, in this case, there's not audiobook, but reading the novel, what do you feel is the power of someone reading a novel that is about a topic, and it's when it's not like autobiographical, and it's a topic that they can relate to?
Sometimes I think it's actually easier because, like with a memoir, if somebody's talking about their life, that's that one person, and you can imagine that one person. When you have a whole bunch of people going through something and it's fictionalized, you can relate to whichever one you relate to the most, but you can see every aspect of everybody's life. And in this book, they go through the anger, they go through the grief, they go through laughing because my father passed away. It's coming up on 9 years. And I think about him every single day. I was super close with him. And when he passed away, I went my mother lives up north and I'm in Los Angeles. So all my sisters and I went there on the day he passed away. And we spent time laughing about the crazy because my father had this really sort of dry sense of humor, and he would whisper things at like family dinners that only like certain people would hear and start laughing. And it was so special to be laughing. I mean, we would literally be crying, and then 2 seconds later, we'd be laughing, which is what I also wanted to put in the book because you can honor somebody by the funny memories that you remember.
And honestly, honor someone by being yourself, even in within that grief. If you are a person that usually is snarky, or have make throws these kind of comments, like, why would you not be that way while you're grieving? Like, if that's who you are, you're going to grieve with the personality that you are. And even more, if the person that died did have those type of qualities, like you're saying, why not honor them with that type of spunk? We have some my mom will it will be 9 years from my mom this year
Oh,
as
wow.
well. Yeah. Okay, so you're you sharing now that part of then your life, and within then your grief. So here we know now there's a part of you that's real, that's kind of plugged in the loss and how you were able to intertwine it there. So with that, you saw the distinct ways in which each of you sisters grieved the death of your dad. Was that something that you could relate to as well?
Yes, and that came out of me just because we all, when somebody dies, my dad, this book, it's a suicide, but my dad did not die of suicide. He was 85 years old and had medical issues. And but there's still a weird sense of in this case, in the book's case, of course, they have anger because they don't know why their mother did it and they want to find out. But there's still this weird up and down of like, why did you leave me? And that's sort of a weird, it's not anger at the person, but it's anger at life. And it's anger at like, God, I can't believe that you left me. And even though he was older, I was still sad and angry that, he wasn't still in my life and I couldn't keep calling him. And I spoke to him on the phone the night before he died. And I knew he was dying. He had pneumonia and he was in a hospice, so I knew he was going to die. But at least he had all his mental capacity, so I could talk to him. And basically, I couldn't say the words goodbye. I just couldn't. But at least I got to talk to him, and that was really it was hard. But it's grief for me is such an up and down thing, even after 9 years. I think about him all the time. Every once in a while, he was the writer in the family, and I didn't think I was going to be a writer. I never thought that, and he always wrote for all his jobs. He wrote, and so I finished this book after he passed away, and I know he would have been so proud of me and would have loved to read it. And my first book, I mean, I'm sorry, I finished my first book and I went back, and Maggie has this great relationship with her father. And at the time I wrote the book, it was not my relationship with my dad, but I did go back, and it's the only relationship I ever wrote, or the only character I ever wrote that was really kind of based on my dad. And even though this father in the book has different issues, I still wrote like the dialogue. A lot of that stuff is about me and my dad.
I love that you are sharing that you basically one of the ways you mourned was doing something that already came naturally to you, which was writing and how you incorporated then your grief within that book. What else did you do in your grief process, like that helped your grieving and your mourning? Were there any
You know,
other ways that you incorporated? You say you're really
I
into health and nutrition, so wondering if how that impacted your life.
Well, I did talk to him, just like in my head, I would talk to him. I also, where I write, where my computer is, I keep a little tiny urn with his ashes on it. Because every time I look at it, it's right next to where I type. And it just makes me feel better, just to kind of feel like I know he's there somewhere. And he used to come to both my parents, to every sitcom script I ever wrote, everything that was produced, they would come and sit in the audience. So there's a part of me that feels like when I'm writing, he's sitting next to me and he's just right there.
So it's just the talking that and did you always have that type of a connection with death before his passing? Was this the most close, like relation wise of someone dying for you? Was your dad
Yes, I
or
did
had some
lose my grandmother before my father, and I was close to her. But my father, I always felt like he was the person that I went to and I had so much in common with, and he always wanted to know about my writing and things like that. So, yeah, he was the closest I was to.
how do you feel that your beliefs about what happens after we die impact the way that you may grieve?
I think I don't know enough about like the spirituality of the whole thing.
What do you believe? Whatever you feel, it's not even like of a reality,
Right.
your own
I
reality
just
for your
feel like
own information.
he's influencing me. Like there's
Mhm.
somebody, he's there somewhere, and his spirit or his energy is just influencing me. I mean, honestly, I think I write snarkier now than I would have
I love
before. It just feels like he's in me at times,
What's your dad's name?
Howard. And I
You
dedicated
might
my
have
first
to
book
add
to him.
you might have to add his name to the co-writing
Yeah,
aspect of
exactly.
you're like co-writing with. It's like, "Oh,
Yes.
yeah, that was not my type of joke. That's dad's. Okay, this part is
That's
written by
funny.
dad."
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes I think that's true. Sometimes I write things and the next day I come and read them. I'm like, "Who wrote that? I don't remember writing that.
Y
Some fairy
but
came in and rewrote it."
yeah, but a lot of times I feel like with creativity, it's like that. It's as if it's coming from a different place. So why not even think that if we do believe in this other kind of realm, why not feel that they are influencing a lot of times all these aspects of creation that we do? So I love that and the fact that you have that constant reminder of his ashes there on your desk as you write and how that influences. So, okay, now back to the book. Okay, so when people leave, it touches on not only the topic of grief in different ways and the storylines of death, the storyline of the main character Carla, but also within her own life of things she went through. But there's also the aspect of the grief of finding out you do not even know who you are, or discovering things and grieving that maybe you didn't know a person as well as you thought you did. So there's a lot of, it's like a mystery. It's a mystery. There's a
It's a little bit
mystery.
of a mystery. Yeah, there is. They
Yes.
do have to solve why she would do it
Why
because
she
they
would do
think
it, and
she's great.
within
They
that.
think she's doing great. I mean, as far as they're concerned, she's happy.
Yeah, that they had never seen any signs of for her to, take her life. But then within that, then they're discovering things then about their own lives as they discover their own mom's life. So with that, how did you thread, because you're writing in the different forms of characters, and to kind of keep track of, like, oh my gosh, okay, who's already shared this part of the story. How do you do that? Like like a like a it's like multiple personalities because you're writing in 4 different voices. How do you do that?
For me, it's interesting. As soon as I pick a name for a character, the character exists. I don't know how to explain it, but then I can see who they are. And I had an outline, of course, but something about each name told me who each character was. And even Carla, because you go through and, as you know, you see the background of, and you find out, why she did what she did and how that affected the sisters' lives and how the sisters realize once they figure it out, like how they made decisions. Like they were little kids and their lives were determined somewhat by the secret that their mother kept, and they didn't realize that. But I just sort of like started with the name and then I just created whoever this was. And I do backstory. Like I start to think like, okay, this character is a therapist. So what can be things that would be against being a therapist and be different for that? And then one of the characters is a sober alcoholic. So this secret, how would that affect her? And then the other character kind of followed in her mother's footsteps by getting married to the first person that she ever dated and having 4 kids very young. And so she follows her mother. So each person sort of, once I knew the secret and figured out all of that, I kind of went back and said, okay, how would this secret, if they knew it, but if they didn't know it, how could that affect their lives?
Hi, I just had to come on and just kind of interrupt right now this episode that you're hearing. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you guys are listening to this conversation. And every single time I hear a guest, there's something new that I learn and something else that ends up showing up within me that I realize I still have to work on. And if by chance, as you're listening to this conversation, you're feeling the same, that there's parts of you that are being stirred up, and you are navigating a life transition right now that feels just heavy and stressful and just layered with grief, I want you to know that you do not have to do it alone. I invite you to connect with me for a free 15-minute discovery call, and we'll explore what's coming up for you and see if working together feels like the right fit. Just check the show notes below for my email and reach out for details. I'd really love to support you in integrating these transitions with more ease and clarity. Can't wait to hear back from you. Okay, let's keep on listening to the episode. What you just said right now, that is like, once I found out the secret, as you're saying that, it's as if the secret unfolded to you as you were writing. Is that the case? Is that what happened?
As I was doing the outline, because I had
As you
like
were
a
doing the
couple of
outline.
different secrets, and I thought, well, which one would work? And then I started
Oh.
to sort of go, okay, this secret, how would this affect it? This secret, how would this affect
Mm.
it? And so it took me a little bit of time to kind of go, okay, that's the secret. And then you go back and then psychologically you figure out how would that have affected me? And then you put it into those characters.
That's incredible. Yeah, because 'cause I've never written a novel, so I wouldn't know even, like, how it is that you do this. So it's the outline, and then you kind of pick of the scenarios. Do you have to then also do investigative work of, like, finding out ways, or do you really more by by the feeling of,
It
like, let's
depends
say,
on
if it doesn't relate to you, let's say something of the personality, would do you just go more by, "Okay, I think this is how they would do," or do you have to do research on how people that are therapists would?
Well, I do a little bit of research in the sense that, like, I have a friend who's a sober alcoholic. So she and before I even wrote this book, she and I talk all the time. So I kind of knew how certain things worked. And then I asked her, okay, here's what I'm doing. So that's perfect. I did research for my mom was a therapist. I have been in therapy. I kind of know a lot about, I know a lot of therapists. So that worked out. Abby's story, just getting married young. I got married at 26. I didn't, it's not the same because I dated a lot of people, but I could kind of get into that character. I'm a mom. So I kind of got that one. So that stuff sort of just came to me. But the suicide, long before I even wrote this book, we knew a bunch of comedy writers that all in the same year took their own lives. And I knew that some of them were depressed, but when they took their life, everybody thought they were great. Like everybody knew that they had depression. But when it actually happened, they were like working on their own show and they were running it and they seemed like they were laughing in the room the night before they killed themselves. And then, so it didn't really occur to me to write this. But then one day I was listening to the news and there was a report on a bunch of kids that went off to college. And in their first year, they're telling their parents how great things are and they love college. And then they killed themselves. And their parents had to go and try to talk to all their friends and figure out why would you do that? Like, what happened that you didn't tell us? So that was sort of the tiny kernel of the story, but I didn't want to do somebody in college. So I thought, well, what would happen if a mother did that and she had this secret that her kids didn't know? And so the three of them have to leave their lives. They move into her house and they come up with these clues that lead them in different places to try to figure out what happened. And she's a single mother. And so they don't have like their father to go to and say, hey, what happened? So that's kind of how that really developed.
Wow, there's so many layers of how something, shows up. Like you're saying, you saw this and then this can happen and then this, and so to get to what it is. And we don't see that. We just see the end result. We see the book, we feel it. So wow, thank you for that. Because there is something very cathartic about being able to read, like we were just saying before, something that's not a memoir, but even within myself, like even because it's grieving the death of a mom, as I'm reading it and relating to how they could go through, I have two other living siblings. And so how the three of us, each of us went through our own grief. And so relating to that. And when someone is reading or watching a show, and you really do kind of get transported into that space. So thank you for that
Oh, you're
gift.
welcome.
It is,
I
very,
actually had some
special.
people contact me that I did not know, just readers, that one of them said, I have two siblings and my mother killed herself. It was a few years before, but they said this the book helped them, which I didn't know because I don't have a trigger warning, but the book tells you what is going to happen. So if somebody
Mhm,
doesn't want to read it, they can say, oh gosh, this would affect
mhm.
me. But there were a number of people that did read it that said that it really helped them to see these sisters go through that, which makes me happy because that's why I write. I really write to affect people.
Yeah, which is the reason I have the podcast myself, is just sharing stories so that when people listen, they feel oh, I can relate to that, and they don't feel as alone when they're going through something. So when you do read and you get transported into the lives of these characters and you see parts of yourself or your story in it, it can also be soothing. Because if that could come from the imagination of someone, it's like, "Oh, wait, that is also reality because it's happening to me." So you even with that, you feel connected. So yeah,
And every book
it's really
I write from somewhere. I mean, somewhere that's affected me or somewhere that I have been affected by. Those are the kind of books I like to write. A lot of my books are. there's sort of women's issues at different times of their lives, like we talked about before, about
Mhm.
women grieving different parts of their lives. So all my books have something like that in it.
So what's the so one is the
Happily ever
Happily Ever After. The second one, is
is the
escaping my mind.
stories we cannot tell.
The
And
Stories We Cannot Tell. That one. Yeah, what is that one about?
that one is about two women. One's married and Jewish, one is Catholic and single. They don't know each other, but they end up meeting in a support group when they find out they're pregnant, and at right before their second trimester, they're both told that something is very wrong with their babies. And so it's they bond and they go through what happens in their relationships with one's married, one there's a love story going on. Um, but it's exactly what these two women feel as they go through making the toughest decision of their life on whether to keep the pregnancy or end the pregnancy. And there is actually some humor in that one too, because it's not a downer, even though the subject matter is, when they get to that. But you see a lot of stuff going on with the married and her husband, who they have a very good marriage, but it affects relationships. And it's about infertility, it's about miscarriage, it's about a lot of different things in the book. So that's why I said that
Over
all my books have grief in them
all
in
of them.
some way.
Yes, so definitely all 3. I'm gonna make sure to we write all 3 names when I think all 3 names are in your bio. So in the show notes, all 3 names will be there, and when you go to the links that you have, all of them are there because there are so many of the guests I've had that finding out about issues during their pregnancy, delivering a child while they knew that the child was not even gonna live, making
Yes,
those choices, things like
exactly.
that. So, someone listening
And
to
that's
this may
similar to
relate
the
to that
book.
grief.
And
Yeah.
I wrote that book before Roe versus Wade was overturned, and I'm in California, so,
Mhm.
the publisher made me put in just one line. It's not political. The whole book is about compassion and about whether or not you agree, whether or not you're on the same side of the situation, just understanding that somebody else is going through something awful, and these are babies they both want very much. So, it's just about having compassion for somebody going through something and not judging them because they have to make a decision that people don't want to make. It's not like you go in and go, "Yeah, this is fun." We're moms. We want to have kids.
Yeah.
So it's a big, big thing.
Yeah, what you just said about don't judge people, like, it is so true. Everybody is going through something all the time. Like, even in back to the current book, the fact that even the own daughters didn't know that their mother was going
Through some.
through something, um, and so we cannot judge how people live their lives. We cannot judge what people choose to do with their lives because really, truly, we do not know the whole
You
story.
never know what
Um,
somebody's going through, and especially with pregnancy, because, if you're having trouble getting pregnant or you're going through something and all your friends are getting pregnant and you don't want to talk about it. And that's why the name of the book came to me before actually I wrote the book, because it is the stories we cannot tell. You don't talk about some of the stuff that happens to you and you don't tell other people. So anybody who's in your life when it happens knows, but you meet people along the way and they don't know what happened to you. And all of a sudden, people start opening up. It's crazy how many people opened up to me. And I did book clubs on that book, and the people were all talking about stuff that happened to them, and their friends didn't know. They were like, "Oh, you didn't tell me that," and they're good friends in the book club. So it's I just wanted to start a conversation.
hmm. Well, thank you. Those are all important themes, and the more people talk about these different issues, the more deeper conversations we can have and less alone that we feel, so that even people like, let's say, the character of Carla in your book, if Carla would have had someone that she could have felt she could relate to, even maybe would have not made the choice.
If she
We
could
don't know.
tell her
We don't know.
secret to somebody, she had nobody to tell
Somebody.
her secret to.
Right.
So she
So it's
kept
like we
everything
don't
to
know.
herself.
Yeah, we don't know, like, how it could affect or not, the decisions and lives of someone else. So I always like to ask this before I start closing off, the podcast is, Is there something you wanna share with the audience, a question that you might have thought I would have asked you that you wanna make sure that they are left with?
I think it's more about the human experience and just everybody, like you said before, everybody's going through something. And just like understand that we're all human and we're all going through something. And it's very easy. The one thing I told myself I would stop doing is comparing myself. I mean, we all have social media and we all see things on social media, and it's always the best stuff. You're not going to put up, this is what I'm going through today. So I write my books to do that. I write my books so people know that people go through things. And, like the second book is really more women's fiction. I don't think many men would read it. But my first book, a lot of men read it about relationships, and they said it helped them understand their wives and what their wives were going through. And the third book, a lot of men are reading it, because that book, anybody could read that book. But I think that especially as women, I think we need to talk. I think we need to talk about our grief and like whatever our grief is. Like if it's, your child's going off to college. I cried like a baby when I sent my kids to college. I mean, they didn't know. I would leave them in college and I would get in the car and just I would be with my husband and we would just be crying because it's such, even though we're happy for them, it's a grief for us, our grieving, like our kids aren't going to be in our home anymore, or they're not little kids. I look at pictures, I grieve them when they're little, So there's so much different types of grief out there. But as a community, I think it's easy to look at other people's lives and say, oh, their life is perfect. They're in, traveling, or they're doing this or that, or the other, or their kids are doing this. You don't really know all the struggles that they're going through. And sometimes there's major struggles with kids, or their kids are anxious and they're, dealing with that. And that's, as a parent, we know that's a big
Mhm.
grief for us is we're sad when our kids are not happy. And it's really hard. And I don't think that ever goes away. I mean, my kids are 26 and 28, and I don't think it will ever go away if they call me and they tell me something happened and I'm sad. So it's just being a community to people, really. That's what I really want to express. And that's what I want my books to express to people.
And they do, they do. They open up the feeling of, again, not feeling alone and knowing there's somebody else at least out there that thought that to write that. So if that can be of any
Exactly.
consolation to anybody that's holding a book in their hands that feels seen, that is so important. Yeah, your emotions are valid, what you're going through is valid, and seek and start having conversations, and you'll realize that others are going through that. And even just saying to someone, "Hey, I just read this book," and someone saying, "Oh, me too." I guess that's the importance of even book clubs, like you said,
Yeah.
because even within a book club, then the topics can come up and it's like, I went through that. It's not just about talking about the characters, it's about how the characters relate to your life and some of the experiences
I'm
you've
in a
been
book
through.
club and we do that all the time. We'll talk about the book, but we'll also talk about how that book affected us and which character we might go like, "Oh, that happened to me," or whatever. And you learn things about people, and it's a community thing.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I honestly had never even seen I've never been, like, in a full-on, like, book club that way, like, of a novel. I've only done, like, in more, like, in the self-help kind of books, never in the novel, and so I'm like, I don't even know what it looks like to be in a now I know because you just shared, and I can see how I mean, I talk to like, I say, "Hey, my gosh, I read this book, you have to read it," and then I talk to somebody else, but it's not like we're fully like, "This is the book we're gonna read next." Yes, yeah,
Yeah. And I
but
go to
I
book
talk about it
clubs.
all the time.
I go to book clubs virtually. I go to book clubs in person. I'm going up. My mother has this book club of my mother's 88, and she has all these friends and they do a book club, and I always go. They read my books, and it's
Oh, so
fascinating, and they're wonderful people. So I always go to that personally. I go to ones in LA personally, but otherwise I do them virtually. And it's so
I
much
love that.
fun when all these
Yeah,
people
how
read
is
your
it?
book.
Yeah, how is that? How does that feel, like, to be in a group of people that have read your book, and does everybody is everybody that is there know that you are the author?
Yes, they all know.
Okay,
The way book
okay.
clubs usually work, if ones I go to are a little different, but usually they get together for like 15, 20 minutes and they talk about the book before I even get there, because then it gives them a chance. Like, what if they don't like it, or somebody has something or whatever? But it's so much fun to go to a book club or even do it virtually because everybody is telling you things about your book you didn't even realize. Like there's things that people interpret in a book that the author doesn't always know they even put in, if that makes any sense. It's
Mm.
just the way they
Well, because like
interpreted
even
something.
but it's also like what you just said, because a lot of times you see it and you're like, "Wait, when did I write that?" Because if it's inspiration, sometimes you don't even know what's gone to the page. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And they'll interpret something a character does as something you might think as an author, okay, I intended that this, but they'll see something really subtle in there and they'll say, oh, this was really interesting why this character did this. And you're like, wow, I didn't even see that. And then it hits you. Like somebody said to me about my first book, and I didn't think about it. They said, this is a love story. And I said, but it's not. And they said, no, it is. It's a woman falling in love with her life. And I thought,
Mm.
wow, that's really, I didn't think of it that way because I don't think of it as a love story, even though there's love in it all over the place for her family and her parents and everything. But I didn't think of it that way. And they said, no, she's falling in love with her life.
It's like a
And I
piece
thought,
of art, right? When somebody's looking at a piece of art hanging on a wall, even like we don't know exactly what Van Gogh
they
or Picasso or
intended.
whoever was it, yeah. But then as it's really you as the viewer, what are you gathering from that and your feelings? And that is just as valid as whatever it was that was the intention of it. So
And you bring in
again,
your own life into something. Like you'll see
yes.
something in a character that has to do with you. So you'll relate to that in a way that's not necessarily what the author intended, but if it relates to you in that way, that's fantastic. And I love hearing that. That's my favorite thing to hear is when somebody says, "Oh, this character did such and such for this reason." I'm like, "No, but that's a good point."
Yeah, I could relate to Abby and yours, and so that was my relating was
Mm.
she was like the one I'm like, "Yep, that's a lot of it, a lot." I could relate to a lot of things of her emotions, with her. So, thank you again for sharing about all 3 of your books and also bringing these insights about really how much art can really connect us to our own emotions. And now we want to make sure that the listeners know where they can find you and connect with you and buy the books. So if you can share that with us, please.
Sure. I have a website. It's lesliearasmussen.com. And I sell my books on there. If anybody wants a signed copy, I sell them on there. But otherwise, they can get the books anywhere books are sold. If they want to go to their independent bookstore, they can order it. If they don't have it, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, all the rest of them. You can follow me on Instagram at Leslie R. Author, and I'm on Facebook at Leslie A. Rasmussen Author. So
And I'll
I'm
make sure to put all
everywhere.
those links below in the show notes. So make
Great, thank
sure
you.
to take a look at that. Thank you so much, Leslie. Thank you again
Thank
for
you for having
the
me. This was
gift
wonderful.
of the books. Yes, thank you again. And we look forward to maybe one time talking then about maybe one of the other books that
Sounds
we
good.
kind of touched on them. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.